All right. Okay, well, we're going to get started. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for Promoting Yourself in Negotiating 101. This is presented by the Atlanta Young Alumni Network. My name is Davis Husk, and I am an Associate Director of Alumni Engagement at Emory University with the Emory Alumni Association. I sit on the Regional Engagement and Volunteer Management team where I focus efforts on engaging our young alumni in Atlanta and beyond. As you settle in and get ready for what I hope is a wonderful presentation, allow me to introduce our speakers and panelists for this afternoon. So first, joining us from Houston, Texas is Natasha Wade. Natasha is an ICF-trained life and career coach, a skilled recruiter, and a senior diversity talent management professional for a Fortune 500 healthcare professional organization. In addition, Natasha passionately leads her own venture in namesake Natasha Wade, your Black Women's Soul Coach, where she draws from 10 plus years of experience and effectively helping individuals strategically reach or exceed their personal and professional goals. Natasha also draws on over 4 years of experience within the staffing and recruiting industry when guiding professionals. Natasha, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Next up, we have Brian Boland, an alum that graduated from Emory Goizetta's Executive MBA program in 2019. Brian is the co-founder and managing partner of Reserve Equity Partners, former director of analytics and insights at CRH, and a former consultant at KPMG. In all of this, over the past 12 years, Brian has worked closely with senior executives and finance industry leaders across Europe and in North America in finance, strategy, business intelligence, transportation, and advisory roles. Thanks for joining us, Brian. And finally, thank you so much. And finally, we have Ishani Singh, a recent 2020 graduate herself from Emory College's Human Health program. Ishani also serves as a professional development committee member on the Atlanta Young Alumni Network board. She is a technical recruiter with Google, where she builds upon her experience of former recruiting experiences at Apex Systems and Stepping Stones Group. Ishani is skilled in leading teams, developing and implementing strategies, and managing pipelines with a demonstrated history of working in the tech and healthcare industries. So thank you, Ishani, especially for representing AYA here today.
Glad to be here.
Well, again, so excited for you all to be joining us. Little virtual audience applause. Really excited to get started. So before we jump into this, everyone, I just want to give you a quick run of the agenda. This will be a conversation predominantly surrounding 3 major themes or phases that we hope will cover a large spectrum of our young alumni's various career stages, though we recognize fully that we are all unique individuals, which leads me to my next point. We will then, before the formal closing of the program, allow some time for any audience Q&A, so be sure to submit any burning questions you have throughout the program. Okay, so first, teeing up the conversation, you all, I want to think of sort of our phase 1 as new graduates who are negotiating for the first time. So they've left Emory, or about to leave Emory, and they've applied for their sort of first professional experience. Let's just start off with sort of maybe a basic question. How would this individual, this prospective person, effectively negotiate a salary increase or have that sort of first salary conversation? Perhaps Natasha or Ishani, would you like to start us off here?
Ishani, would you like to go first, or would you like me to go first?
Sure, I can just kick off a little bit. I would suggest definitely doing some research. Market research is, of course, really important when you are looking to have a salary increase or even have that first role salary. Definitely make sure that you are able to pull on what is relevant in your area, in your specific niche that you're working in or the industry, because for example, if you're a consultant for one industry versus another, your salary can vary, and same with based on your location. So definitely really important to make sure you do your research before going into any salary discussions.
Absolutely, and I'll piggyback off of that. I think in my years of recruiting and working with internal associates, I think if you don't take away anything else from what we say, understand that confidence is king, right? And the way that you build that confidence is through the research, right? You don't wake up, you're not born learning and knowing how to negotiate. So a lot of what you do in building that confidence is going to places like Glassdoor, going to places like Indeed, going to places like salary.com, going to places like PayScale, going to places like LinkedIn, and Googling and searching the role of your choice along with the word salary and seeing what are the different ranges and aggregating that information so you could get a comfortable range of what it is that you want to request, so that when you make your request, you can say, based on market data, this is what this particular role demands, and this is what I'm requesting with confidence. And you couple that with the networking, with making sure that you have a contact or a mentor in the industry that could sort of calibrate, or so you can sort of check that data against for real life, personal experience, so you can come with a more accurate figure.
Those are both really good points. I'd only add one thing. We're recruiting all the time right now. We're recruiting every month, and I always ask, we're trying to find A players. What would an A player do? If A players would do that research, they would negotiate based on that research in a humble and fair way. Even if it doesn't work and you stand on your salary, it reaffirms you're an A player if you're able to do that in the right way. So it can actually spin to a positive during the process, once it's done respectfully and with the research and background that the ladies mentioned.
So on that point, right, if someone's done their research, they're feeling confident in the offer, or is confident in their, what they're looking for, what they're applying for. Let's say they get a number back. It's a little less than what they hoped for. Do you all feel it's okay to counter a salary increase as a new professional? And how might they go about that?
I think it's appropriate to counter at any stage of your career, because one of the things that I think people go through is buyer's remorse whenever they get into a role and they settle for something that was less than what their conscience allowed them to take. They end up feeling a little bit miserable at that role because they don't feel like they're adequately compensated at the level at which they want it to be. So if you gave them a figure and you were confident in that figure, and again, this is under the assumption that you didn't give them a minimum any less than what you are willing to take, and they come back with less than your minimum, it's okay to simply say something along the lines of, I apologize, but unfortunately, that's not a figure that I'm prepared to accept at this point. Again, based on the market data, this is the range that I am willing to accept. Let me know what your decision is, or please feel free to discuss it with your leaders and come back to me with a figure that you feel is appropriate.
Yeah, most of the time, when you open with a salary, there's some room. Most of the time, it can depend on the role, of course. When I started in consulting, everyone across the board had the same salary. Everyone that came in as a trainee had the same salary. So I don't think there's any room in that scenario. But as you move through your career and you have experience, there's generally some room. And employees will generally open up with an offer that there's a little bit of room. Again, it can depend. And the later you get in a career, the more flexible that would be. An A player would negotiate.
So Ishani, I'm thinking of you here because I imagine technical recruiting is, well, like lots of work areas right now is competitive. How do you feel when some of your applicants bring in external offers to negotiate? Is that something you welcome as a recruiter, or might see sometimes, or at least in that process?
Yeah, so it is a really big factor, and it come to us with competing offers or even internal offers. And I would say it's not something that's frowned upon. I think it just gives you that competitive edge. It kind of just from a, mental standpoint, like, okay, it makes it look like, okay, other companies are also interested in you. It's not a point against you if you come with a competing offer. And I think it is something that candidates can leverage to get the best offer that they can get. Now, I don't encourage people making up that they have competing offers, because that is something that people do. So definitely it is a good idea to have something to back it up, have that research, but also if you say you have an offer, make sure you can back that up as well. And if you don't, it's sometimes you can see through that.
It reminds me of sort of the price matching schemes at other other stores and such. Well, great. One last question here. I'm thinking of the phase that sort of came to mind as you all are discussing this. I hear a lot, because I've been there as well as a new grad looking at where to go. I've heard a lot of advice about sort of finding those connections, those networks for where you're looking at for the prospective places. What advice do you have for people who may not have that? They're applying somewhere, there isn't an internal reference, or if there is, it's very distant. How can you? What's some advice that you would have for that person to maybe give them a little confidence boost and or strategy for ensuring a successful application despite that?
Well, first, I think I would challenge anyone that says that they don't have some sort of connection, because I'm thinking that the average person probably has 500 friends on Facebook. Instagram, you're probably connected. LinkedIn, you're probably connected. The alumni network, you're probably connected. You're connected in so many different ways that somewhere along the way, you're probably 3 to 6 degrees of separation from someone. If you just ask, if you're vulnerable enough to ask your network, you're probably connected in some way to someone inside that organization that you can offer to take out to lunch or have like a virtual coffee and just simply pick their brain. But in the event that you are just completely bereft or just lacking someone in that network, honestly, just look online. Like there's a lot of, and on LinkedIn alone, there's a lot of information that the organization puts out there. Right? Again, there's a lot of data you can Google. There's a lot of information that you can look in industry mags and things like that to basically build up your case and try to use that information to leverage your standing within the organization. And frankly, companies are no different than people. They love to be flattered. So when you come to the table with information that the average person does not come with in an interview, they feel like you're invested in more ways than one.
Natasha hit that spot on there. From my perspective, when people reach out, I get people reaching out a lot. When someone mentions the Emory connection, I'll respond very quickly because that alumni carries a value. So with that alumni Emory connection, it casts your net very wide. And even if it's a friend who used to work there or someone you're connected with who's connections of connections, there's various different ways you can do that and leverage that connection and maybe get an introduction through another person to somebody that's working there. From the reaching out perspective, that alumni network is very powerful.
Yeah, those are great points. It's sort of one of those true alumni benefits that I think is not always stated. But in Natasha, I'm hearing too, it's like, something I hope our Emory grads are all good at is doing your research. It sounds like it's really coming back to that you can make a strong application when you have done your time to prepare yourself.
Well, not only that, and I think, let me just say this, I think the preparation when it comes to relationship building is long before you get the job. So honestly, even in this space, if people know if people even know you, if they want to reach out to you, or if they know of other folks within the alumni organization that they just simply connect with, like make that an ongoing practice of just meeting people and getting to know them just for the sake of getting to know them, not just simply because you want something from them, but because you simply want to get to know them as people and have a mutual connection and benefit.
That's a fantastic last point. I want to just re-emphasize what Natasha said there. If someone is reaching out to me looking for something, that's generally what happens. It's very refreshing to get somebody just looking out to make a connection, not asking for anything, or even offering something without asking. It's so powerful. And I'll remember that so much more than the many people that ask for stuff. It's okay to ask, but it's just, you really make a difference. That's a fantastic point Natasha made.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you both for that nuance. Ishani, I know we're having a little bit connectivity issues, but if you can hear me, just want to offer you the last word. Anything you're thinking of here as a recent graduate yourself that you'd like to share before we move further.
Yeah, I think there have been some really great points, and a lot of what I was going to say as well, of looking into your network of who you already know and who they might know. And then one thing I've even done personally is reaching out and finding that thing that you have in common. Like Ryan said, adding that alumni connection, adding in, were you in an organization with somebody, or is there anything that you have in common by looking on their LinkedIn and bringing that up and building that before, like Natasha said, before you need something, just getting to know them. And one quick way, I mean, even just suggesting like a 15-minute coffee chat. Can I learn a little bit about you and how you've gotten to where you are, is a really great way to just kick that off and build that connection so that when you do need to use it, you have that extended work. And as a recent graduate, you have access to sports or different philanthropic organizations. Just pulling on past alumni from those groups is a really great way to find that common thread.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Thank you so much. It also just makes me think, sort of a last point here, that a silver lining or great thing about this sort of virtual space that we're all in nowadays is how easy it is to make those to set aside time for those connections, to hop on a call with someone, and regardless of what schedules are looking like. So, well, thank you all so much. I'd love to sort of transition into thinking about our next phase, and here, thinking about our young alumni who have been graduated a couple, maybe several years now. They're new working professionals and promotions are on their mind. Just basic, sort of general question again, to sort of tee us off here. What are some things that, I can do to let my boss know that I'm ready for a promotion?
Brian, I was going to let you kick that off since I know that's a passion issue for you.
Yeah, I mean, we get these conversations a lot in the companies that we have under our portfolio, and it's what I often say to people looking for promotion is start doing the work of the person that you would be when you get that promotion. So just start taking on that additional responsibility and that additional work, that when the conversation comes up, it comes a lot easier to talk about it when you're effectively doing some of those roles. So looking at what you need to be doing in that position and taking on those responsibilities. Even if there's someone in that role, a lot of the time if they're swamped, they'll be very happy for you to take certain responsibilities off them once you're not trying to take their job, or once they don't think you're trying to do that. But yeah, that can be one of the most powerful things that immediately comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. I'll just say that, and this is something that I even recognize that I can grow within myself, but one of the most important things you can do is have a big picture understanding of what's important to the company right now. Like right now in 2022, there's a lot of things that are super important to every single company. Like for instance, with COVID impact and things like that, there may be some folks just still trying to elevate their capability of leading virtual teams, right? Or looking at work life reimagined, or doing fewer things better. Understand what's top of mind and focus for the company so that you can tie in your value to what's important to the company. Because I think one of the biggest mistakes that we sometimes make is we do the work that we think is important versus doing the work that is actually important. And so that's why when you come to the promotion, you can actually be able to say, I've been able to do A, B, and C that have been able to make an impact on what's important to the company.
Yes, and just going off of that as well, I think I would like to really emphasize the importance of having metrics or just some data to back up where you want to be, and showing, not just doing the work, but having some concrete examples when you come to your manager or to whoever you're going to request that promotion, having that information to back up where you want to be and show the work that you've done. Like, okay, I was able to bring my sales from X to Y, or I've been able to reach out to this many clients, and this is the growth I've seen. And having those concrete examples somewhere to really back up where you want to be and where you're aspiring to be will be really helpful as well.
And just to piggyback off of that, I think, because what Ishani said was super important, I think where a lot of us struggle is just tracking those accomplishments. So I would make it a point to put it on your calendar, like every couple of weeks or every month, to just update your resume or update your career profile or wherever is documentable, so that when that time comes for you to make those, to make that negotiation, you have that information in front of you.
Tasha, that's an excellent point. And even a practice I try to adopt is keeping even like a running spreadsheet throughout the year, because it'll also help our performance reviews be a lot smoother as well. Brian, one thing that stuck out that I sort of want to sort of push back on, or at least get your thoughts on. So if you're going, you're preparing for a conversation with your boss about sort of negotiating a pay increase or a promotion, how can we draw that fine line between showing that you can do the work of the next level by actively doing it, but not getting stuck into that position where you might be not necessarily getting compensated for a lot of extra work, right? How do you draw that line between your manager and between proving yourself?
Yeah, it's a great point, and you do have to be careful. I would think it's a short period of time. So say, for example, a 90-day sprint where you're doing that, you've proven you're doing the role, but you're not going to do that role indefinitely for being underpaid. So it gets past the point about you being ready or able to do the work, but it is something you want to be conscious of. So a short sprint, and even letting your boss know that, hey, I'm going to do this for 90 days to show you. You're defining that time period, and you're letting them know that the reason why you're taking this on, so that they're not under any illusions about your goals, and they have plenty of notice and time to prepare.
That's great. Yeah, I appreciate that addition, clarification there. I think it is interesting that it ultimately does come down, I think, to timing and how you sort of, again, how you present yourself. Okay, so
one thing to add as well, Davis, just came to top of mind is, there's some active conversations in our organization right now around that, and you have a timeline as a boss and as a leader. Now you have a timeline, and you're kind of pressed into making a decision in that timeline, and you're pressed to at least give feedback and give an employee information. So it forces the hand in a respectful and thoughtful way of your employer to at least get feedback. And if it's not going to work out, you're compelled to give that feedback that it's not, or have really good reasons. So it really helps to not have a long period of time where you're wondering what's going on.
That's excellent. I think it ties back to Natasha's point about also just putting the need and sort of demand there for also constantly thinking about how your company is thinking about things and how they're valuing your role there. Okay, so taking it to sort of a worst case scenario, if the prospective person is rejected for a pay bump or promotion, they're getting some of that clarification from the applicant, from the employee's perspective. How do they sort of reconcile the difference between, is it HR, is it manager, and when they're coming back to this conversation, how can they maybe better demonstrate that impact if they're thinking of, doing this at a later time or a few months from now? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think it honestly starts with just being honest with your leader, right? I think sometimes there's a lot of times where we're waiting on our leaders to initiate those conversations with us, instead of just simply asking, hey, or just simply being honest and saying, hey, I was really invested and excited about this particular opportunity, and I'm still very much invested in being able to transition into this role. Can you give me some specific, meaningful feedback on what I did well? When, what am I doing well? What is it that I can really improve on? What would put me on par or make me better than some of the top competitors in this space? And so basically, what will it take to get me to where I need to be? And if you have that, and especially if you build that good relationship, that good communication with your leader by managing up, you should be able to give some responses back. If you don't have that safe space with your leader, I'll be honest and say it's about time to think about, is that the best space for you?
That's a great point, Natasha. It also makes me wonder, when you're thinking about sort of comfortable, and also from a manager's perspective, Natasha, when you're thinking about what a comfortable compensation sort of progression is for those that are new to the workforce, how do you think this employee can sort of determine what an appropriate salary amount is, even when they're asking for that promotion? Do you think is it comfortable for them to reach out to their colleagues and sort of directly, candidly, maybe create some of those relationships where they can even ask questions such as, how are you getting compensated at those different levels?
Well, no. I think they can absolutely leverage their network. And I would suggest, actually, again, going back to building those mentors, and frankly, more importantly, sponsors. It's important to have a mentor sponsor in your industry, somebody that's sort of aspirational to where you want to be, to where you can ask that honest question. You can have that psychologically safe space to be able to ask, with the experience and with the experience and traits that I bring to the table, what do you believe a professional at my level should be demanding, right? This is what the market, again, going back to the research, this is what the market is showing. You tell me from an inside perspective, how that lines up with my experience. But I would never ask someone what they're making, because it's just such a personal question. If they choose to volunteer it, great, but I wouldn't be in the habit of that. But if you do happen to know of other colleagues that are somewhere along the lines of where you want to be, you could ask them the same question. Look, I'm thinking about a career change. What do you think someone of my level should be demanding or should be requesting?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I think it certainly prioritizes how, you do need to seek those mentor and sponsorship, relationships. It also makes me think, Natasha, in your own words, how would you distinguish those, a mentor versus a sponsor?
So there's a couple of different things. So a mentor is someone, the way that I've always heard it is, a mentor talks with you and a sponsor talks about you, right? So a mentor is going to be the person that, if I'm just talking to you, Davis, this is how you want to show up. This is what executive presence looks like. This is how you want to show up and do a presentation to the CEO. This is how you want to manage your first team. This is how you want to deal with conflict, right? This is how you want to collaborate with your team members. I'm sharing information with you from my own personal experience and observation. But a sponsor is having conversations about you, because now that I've decided that I have faith in Davis and in his work, now I'm going to rooms, very closed, hush door conversations with people with power and saying, when we have this next director opportunity or this opportunity over here, Davis is the first person we should be thinking about because he's been able to accomplish A, B, and C in 2022.
It's so important to show up, I think, as an advocate, especially I know we're speaking more broadly to a young alumni audience here, but it just makes me think, take Natasha's words to heart here, that even when you step into those managerial roles, that you will remember that same advice for your direct reports.
One thing to add to that, Davis, from a mentor-mentee perspective, I mean, when I was very fortunate to have great mentors throughout my career. And most of those relationships happened organically, where we never really defined it, but it was organically built, where I was going for advice regularly and they were happy to provide it. And it was just an organic relationship. And it works the same as I've now developed into a mentor. That organic relationship, you want to give back and you want to help the next generation. Nearly everybody does. So finding that common ground. Ishani brought up a great point about one-on-ones, 15-minute chats, developing the ground, and that. And then on the sponsor point, as you build through your career, the decisions about you are going to start being made without you being in the room. And you want to make sure you have a sponsor in that room who's advocating for you. And I can think of one specific example in my career where it was a very, very close call between me and a very underqualified candidate. And the sponsor told me what happened in the room and how the discussion went and how what different people had said, and he had advocated for me in that. And I just think about if I didn't have that relationship and hadn't built that for that role, it may have went another way. So it's very, very small things can make a big, big difference.
That's wonderful, wonderful advice. Ishani, I want to transition to you as we sort of kick off our phase 3 to sort of bring this sort of full circle. And now I think we're speaking to the young alums who have settled into a role for a while, and they're thinking about personal development, setting up for future success, and sort of looking ahead, even if that involves other companies, other situations. Ishani, I know as a recruiter, you're seeing lots of the sort of front face of the workforce. I'm thinking about sort of a big question, right? That younger workforces are criticized, especially these days, for moving around for a lot of different companies. From your perspective, Ishani, is this something to really be frowned upon, or is it a myth?
That is, I think only time is really going to tell where things are going with that. I think right now with the hiring needs, I think if you have the skills and you can prove that you have the skills, that is your biggest asset, the confidence that Natasha touched on, but also having the skills and having concrete evidence of being able to really show that you can do the job is going to be the biggest factor, bigger than what companies you're coming from or anything like that. And I think it is also very industry specific, the way that will be looked on. In tech, it is pretty common to see people go from company to company. I know in healthcare, that's not really as common. So looking at specific industries will be really important as well. But I think in terms of long-term, only time will tell how that is going to pan out.
Sort of makes me think, Ishani, it's like, how can we build our resumes to present our accomplishments, our progress, and our work to speak louder than the years of service on the right column, Well, Natasha, I'm also thinking from a coaching perspective here as we sort of, building off of that question, do you think, if you're coaching someone, do you think advising them to change jobs? Well, let me back it up a little bit. How would a person know if they're in that situation where they think that leaving is the necessary move to get that compensation that they want to essentially to meet some of their goals? How can there be sort of the self-referential process to see, oh, I think I might have maximized my development here, and going elsewhere might actually be better for my independent growth?
I'll say this, it's a very customized response, because I think a lot of it is it's a matter of a couple of things, right? It's a matter of personal circumstance, logic, and gut, right? So for instance, I would say a really good candidate where it might be a good idea to maybe jump companies for better compensation is if they feel like they've already kind of drained the well where they are. If you're at a particular company and you feel like you have, let's just say you're trying to go into you're maybe a marketing professional right now, you're trying to move up into being a lead or director. If you feel like you've asked all the right questions, you asked your leader, you've asked your mentors, you've asked your sponsors, you've leveraged all your networks, and you've practiced everything that everyone's told you, and yet for whatever reason, you don't seem to feel the support that you need in order to be able to level up where you are, then it may be time to jump a company, because that might be a red flag that particular company is just underappreciating you, right? It could be that you're honestly looking for something new. It could be that particular company is working with some data and processes that are just maybe not as forward thinking as another company. And so you may want to actually change to another company if they're using more innovative processes, or maybe even some tools and software that is really going to level you up to make you more competitive for a lot of other different companies. But I would say a really good, I would say a decision to stay would be, if you just feel like you're just a little frustrated because you feel like you haven't necessarily gotten the feedback you need, but if you know that you honestly haven't really put in the work, right? Because there's some people, I'll be honest, there's sometimes we haven't put in the work, right? We've gotten the feedback from the mentor, we've gotten the feedback from the sponsor, we haven't really applied anything. And so in that sense, you have to also have a level of self-awareness and maturity, and to look honestly within and say, have I exhausted everything that my mentors and my sponsors and my colleagues have asked me to do, right? Or if it's just a leader that, you feel like that particular leader is not necessarily the best leader for you, but you see amazing leaders across the organization, you can stay within the company, but maybe just change organizations and teams, right? So it's all very situational, just sort of depending on what the situation is.
Natasha, that last point there, something I want to bring up to Brian here is, if you are thinking about wanting to sort of move out of your comfort zone and go to another department or team within the organization to grow, Brian, how do I delicately bring this up with my manager?
Yeah, I've moved cross-functionally a number of times in both consulting and in a large multinational organization, and you must go through your direct boss. That's the first person you need to be talking to let them know. You won't want them hearing it from somebody else. And most of the time they should be supportive of that. I mean, you make it about what your experience. If you have an issue with that boss, you certainly don't want to make it about that. You just make it about the experience you're going to gain from the other experience you're looking for. And the elephant in the room on this is sometimes you may have a boss that's not going to be accommodating to that for different reasons, and that's then a challenge in relation to how you navigate that. And that's a delicate one. That's a very delicate one. I think sometimes, I've been in that. Without getting into too much details, I've been in that experience. And it was tough to navigate. The person did not want to lose me at that time, and it was tough to navigate, and it was stressful. But I managed to do it by, again, sponsors and other people in the organization who knew that this was a good role and put some pressure on internally, sensitively. My boss knew that I wanted the move, and there was internal pressure sensitively put on to make sure that happened from people in more senior roles, which helped at that time. So that's the tricky one where most of the time, 90% of the time, I didn't experience that, but the one time I did, it was quite stressful. And it could have resulted in me leaving at that point if it hadn't worked out. So, that brings up the point, and it may be a due diligence on your boss is critical. You may not have a choice earlier in your career about what boss you get, but as you move later, due diligence on who you're going to work for is, I often say to anybody who wants who's coming to work for me, read LinkedIn, read the recommendations, talk to people that have worked for me. I feel very comfortable with that, with the feedback you're going to get. But, when I recall doing due diligence on a boss where a lot of people seemed very stressed and talked about pressure, and there wasn't much positive words that came back, right? So it's what's not said on that diligence. And I could have avoided a situation in my career. If I'd have done better diligence at that, I could have avoided a very stressful situation. So that becomes critical to avoid that particular situation that I had, because 90% of the time, people want to see you grow and develop and continue your career, especially if you've worked very hard for them.
My personal mentor has said a manager can make or break your role more than anything else. And I think it's important to remember in the interview process that you can also interview them and sort of make those assessments. So yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. Just a few more thoughts here, just in terms of personal development. If you are in a tricky situation, perhaps with a manager, with your direct report, are there some ways that you can assess your development and progress outside of performance reviews, particularly if there is a tricky relationship that you're not navigating, especially if it's temporary?
You mean, basically, let me clarify the question. Do you mean, is there a way for you to successfully still navigate your career, regardless of if you have a complicated relationship with your direct leader?
Sort of, yeah. It's sort of like, how can you self-evaluate your development, even if your performance reviews, at least momentarily, are skewing a little harshly critical, especially if it's, let's say, undue?
I hate to keep saying that it's this like a broken record. This is exactly why, again, it goes back to the relationship building. The relationships that you build, the most important, let me just actually back up. The relationship that's most important or only important is not just your leader. I think a lot of people, sometimes they go into a job and the only relationship they're focusing on is their leader. But there's also your leader's leader. There's your leader's colleagues. There's leaders in other parts of the organization. It's really important to understand who the key decision makers are and who the influencers are in your organization, who are the decision makers, because there's certain people within your organization that, regardless of whatever your leader says or whatever sort of pull that they have, that their voice rings a little bit louder than others, right? One snap of the finger and they're like, I like Davis. I think he should be in this organization with us, working on this particular opportunity, right? And and sometimes their voice is a little bit more important than your leader, not to minimize the influence of your leader, but that's why it's so important for you to understand your relationships are really an ecosystem and a network. It's not just dependent on one person.
That's excellent point, Natasha. It leads me to this next question. I think that's particularly important for our time. And I wonder, Ishani, if you've been thinking about this too, as you've settled in at Google. How do you effectively network with coworkers, especially at those higher tenure levels in this virtual environment?
Yeah, so that's a great point. And also going back off of, not only assessing yourself by growing your network is so important and building those relationships, but also having that documentation of self-assessment that this is what I've accomplished is really important. But in terms of your question of how to build that network internally, I would say you already have that warm lead. You already are part of this organization, you have that connection, and just growing off of that, sending a quick message or email and just saying, hey, I'm so excited to be part of this team or part of this organization. Do you have some time for us to just catch up or get to know each other? Is a really good way to just meet more people that are part of your team. and your extended team as well. And then using that time to get to know their journey, get to know how they've gotten to where they are, pick their brain a little bit. What advice do they have that they can give you? And what is something like they wish someone had told them when they were in your shoes? And just especially early on, everyone is, a wealth of information that you can also learn from and grow from. And then going off of Brian's point earlier, it puts you in a position where you can then be that mentor for someone else as well. And if there are, newer members of your team, reaching out to them and extending that as well, it grows your network, but you also can give back and help train basic points and just help guide them. And that will help you, grow those connections in an organic way as well.
Thank you so much, Ishani. I just want to do a quick round robin, or Brian, did you want to add something there?
There was one point I just wanted to add to both the points the ladies had made. And I've seen consistent characteristics. I've seen a lot of unfortunate situations over the years where star quality people have not got recognized and not got promoted and recognized for their work. And a lot of the time, it's because people don't necessarily know what they do or don't know how good they are, because they're working for one person and that person either hasn't done as effective a job as they could have of letting people know how good they are. Maybe they want to keep them, right? They're so good, I want to keep this person. Or they're not in a senior enough role for that voice to be heard loud enough. So making sure other people in the organization know what you're doing, over communicating that. So when those conversations you have people in the room to help you. And so often I've seen people take that so personally when they're not selected, and it can just be a product of people don't know that the people in the positions that are making that decision don't know the information. And that is actually within your power to give them that and to learn from that. And I would encourage anyone out there to make sure that doesn't happen, because when it does, it can be very demoralizing, especially when you've worked so hard.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that just for a second, I would say that's why it's also important to, if you see a high visibility project where there's several leaders, several influencers that will be a part of it, say yes to that, right? Because that's a way for you to kind of show the proof in the pudding without your leader honestly being directly involved.
Well taken, points well taken. It makes me think about the name of this talk, promote yourself. Do the things that you can within your power to present yourself as a qualified, successful candidate. And I think something you've all been coming back to is it can also just start with really organic relationships, and that those are to be prized. Well, thank you all so much. I want to make sure that we have this time for some audience Q&A. So I'm going to check the Q&A boxes right now and see the first one that came in, and then you all can feel free to answer as you see fit. Okay, so again, audience, we're using the Q&A feature here. First, I have from Duran, how does the cost of living come into play with regards to offers for jobs?
From my standpoint, it obviously comes into great play, right? Like a role like maybe a software engineer in Houston is going to look totally different than one in California, right? And so just understanding, like I said, understanding when you do your research, that's why when I do my research, I usually make sure that I put the location, but also more importantly, when you're doing a relocation, make sure that you don't just do a blind search or a wide search, but that you do take into account that particular location, but also take into account your expenses, right? Like, also just do a budget and make sure that the lifestyle that you're living, that your salary is going to be able to take care of that, and that you're being just very honest about that as well. Ishani, I'm pretty sure you have more to add on that one.
Oh, absolutely. I think, the cost of living and cost of labor as well for your area is really important to take a look at. When you're doing your research, like Natasha says, make sure that you are taking into account where you're located, what those roles are going for in your area to give yourself that appropriate range to work on, because it definitely does like play a role in the amount of compensation that you get just due to cost of labor in the area and additional expenses.
Thank you both. Okay, next question is from Mary Lauren. How often is it appropriate to be asking for a raise? I'm sure that can be a customized response, but any general thoughts there?
I would say anytime that you've taken on new responsibility, anytime your responsibilities have expanded, anytime that you honestly get new information on you just not being paid equitably. Sometimes you just get new information that you're just not being paid at the level, maybe because they have just obsolete information, things like that. Or just year to year. I would just do honestly a year to year audit, like really look at just maybe even as minimum as 6 months, but I would just honestly say a year is pretty healthy. Look at kind of the work that you've been doing. Look at the value that you brought to the organization, check the market data again, because some things might have changed that way, and just make sure that you're still making an amount that feels good to you.
Just to add to that, I would think at a minimum, you should be getting a COLA, cost of living adjustment, on an annual basis. But your big bang for your buck on the movement is a promotion. So if you try and secure the promotion, the pay has to follow that. And it's a much easier argument to be in a new role to get because you have to be recomped than doing the same role you were doing in the prior year. You could talk your way into a COLA, which is a 2, 3, 4%, which is fine. But the bigger bang for buck is going to be in your promotion.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for adding that. Okay, I see the next question here from Carmen Shaw. How does one go about finding a professional mentor? I know you all touched on this some, but any other sort of strategies for those early conversations? You're not sure who to go to?
Very simply, I would say everyone should make sure that they have like a 1-year plan and a 5-year plan, right? Like understand where you want to go, short-term and long-term, to understand who those people are. And I'm pretty sure your organization has some sort of database or something where you can either see who those people are, or you can start asking your leader, going back to Brian's point about, leveraging that relationship with your leader, asking, who do you know in this area? And honestly, just, schedule, like Ishani said, a 15 to 30-minute virtual tea or coffee. In our organization, or just, in places where I've worked, I've never heard anybody turn me down. Nobody's ever, never in the history of the organization have I ever heard anybody turn somebody down for coffee. It may be delayed, but.
Yeah, it's a great point. Look 5 and 7 years ahead where you want to be. Find people that are in that spot and ask them for their opinions, thoughts, guidance. That simple thing should be very effective. Like Natasha said, very few people will turn down that request. It doesn't have to be a mentor. It can develop into it organically, but if you find enough people with that experience, you're going to find a relationship naturally will develop.
Yes, I completely agree with both those points, and really just going out of your comfort zone, even if it's not someone that you're directly connected with, but just trying to take that initiative and take that step to introduce yourself, and not even putting the pressure of this person will be my mentor, but letting the conversation naturally flow and getting those instances and guidances from the different people that you speak with, and having that relationship grow into a mentorship is also a good way to look at it as well.
Thank you all. Okay, this might be our last question, but we'll see if we can get one more in. Wendy Rodriguez says, how would you renegotiate during a promotion? So they said they were promoted in August, but was just told the new salary. Did they have the ability to negotiate?
Yeah, you always have the ability to negotiate. It's just a matter of you also, again, coming with the research and understanding, again, what is it that you're renegotiating to, right? And what are you most comfortable with? So you always have the ability and the empowerment to negotiate your salary.
I would agree with that. Armed with the information, and if it's below market, you're not asking for, all you're asking for is, why would this be below market? Like, it's a question. You're not even asking for, you're asking why it's below market. You're forcing them to answer that question. You're not even asking for a raise in that scenario, but you're indirectly asking them to justify where it came from.
Yep.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, I think we do have time to answer this really quick last one, if there's any final thoughts. Xiao Bai says, is there any specific tip about the best way to talk one-on-one to your leader's leader? So their manager or higher, when you've known that you're in a tricky relationship with your own direct manager. So maybe I'm thinking about maybe hopefully clarifying this in the correct way, Xiao, that think, how do you have that delicate relationship of not looking like you're going behind your director manager to sort of seek counsel from senior leadership?
I think this honestly goes back to the organicness that Brian was talking about, because this is going to be a very tricky question. If you have an organic sort of relationship that you've built with your leader's leader, what you're talking to them about is your aspiration to grow and to move. What you're not doing is basically bashing your boss. It'll never look good, because honestly, these things can get very political. So what you want to do is you want to talk more about your aspiration, the positive aspects of where you want to go in the organization. You just never want to gossip and talk down on anyone.
It's a great point. It's a very delicate situation. Natasha hit the nail on the head perfectly. You want to be talking organically about other things, have that relationship developed, and then hopefully that person would ask you directly the questions. And you're very sensitive, talking about your growth and your goals and your alignment, but you're not talking negatively about your direct report to their boss, because people will not take that well, and it could really go the wrong direction. So the organic relationship, the organic conversation, like, it's not the first time you're reaching out to have that conversation. That's going to be tough because that relationship isn't built. They haven't built. They don't know you at that level. So investing in that time and those organic conversations, exactly like as Natasha laid it out.
Well, thank you all so much. Genuinely, on behalf of the Emory Alumni Association and all those watching, we really want to thank you, our panelists, for such thoughtful career advice for our young alumni, and we would gladly welcome you back.